Hey everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balkavage. We're back for another edition of Thyroid Thursday, and today we're doing another lab review. This is a relatively new client of mine. History, diagnosed with hypothyroidism, put on thyroid medication, never felt really well on the thyroid medication. And at the point that we meet, both mixed hypo and hyperthyroid symptoms, a whole bunch of other issues as well. And the initial labs, when we take a look at them, the patient's taken 150 micrograms of T4, and here's her labs. TSH 6.6, that's considered high. Total T4 is 7.6. Total T3 is 991. That's considered, in most circles, maybe a little functioning low, but within the lab reference range. Free T4 is 1.3. That would be considered within the optimal end lab range. Free T3 is within the lab range, but below what some people might think is an optimal range. And then reverse T3 is at 15. It's within the lab range. It's within what I might consider an optimal range. And a lot of people might not. They think that should be as low as possible. Keep in mind that when we look at lab values, there isn't a set optimal range. We have to interpret the labs. Not read them, we need to interpret them. And then if we look at the free T3 to free T4 level, this is 0.23, which is lab low. It's an under conversion that's going on here. So this is a person who's been on up and down on different medications because they don't feel well. This is a dose of medication at 150 micrograms of T4 and a TSH at 6.6 that most allopathic physicians would give this person even more T4 to suppress that TSH. But we have to ask the question, like, if TSH is 6.6 and you want to give more medication, how much T4 is in the bloodstream? And this person has plenty of T4 in the bloodstream, 7.6, that's within the lab range. So why would more T4 be better in this situation? It wouldn't be, and this is why the person's struggling. It's why the person probably came to see me, because they didn't feel well. When somebody was suppressing their TSH, they didn't feel well. Why? Two things. If you suppress this TSH with more T4 medication, it will raise T4. But that increased T4 in circulation, because there's already enough T4 in circulation, is going to reduce the deiodinase 2 enzyme, which is a primary driver of T3 production in the cells and tissues. That would lower T3 even lower, meaning there's less T3 being converted T4 inside the cells, so the person's going to have hypothyroid symptoms in the periphery because of too much thyroid hormone medication, but they're gonna have hyperthyroid symptoms in the brain because there's too much T4 hitting the hypothalamus and activating the sympathetic nervous system. So, not so good. So this is when we met. This is when I made a recommendation that you probably should work with a primary care prescribing physician to reduce the dose. So March comes, person's on 125 micrograms of T4, TSH is 2.09 on less medication. Total T4 is 8.8. That's even better than it was on a higher dose of medication. Total T3 is a little bit better at 95. Free T4 is higher at 1.5. Free T3 is actually a little bit lower, and reverse T3 is a little bit lower, and there's reduced the free T3 to free T4 conversion is 0.19. The person is not feeling good. There's some other things going on. I won't get into that part of the discussion, but we said, all right, not feeling good. Even though TSH looks better, we're working on diet, nutrition. We realize there's something else going on with her physiology at the time. We get another set of lab work done not much long later because she's still feeling hyperthyroid, feeling more anxious, more edgy. And we look, and TSH is 4.53. Total T4 is 10.9. It's even higher now. This is the labs I think her doctor ran. Free T4 was 1.6. There's plenty of T4 in circulation, more than she had before. Free T3 is 2.4. It's about the same, and reverse T3 went up to 23. So what's going on here? This is a person, we're working on diet, we're working on lifestyle changes, we're working on supplementation issues. And what's happening is there's too much T4 in the system. It's creating more of a hyperthyroid effect. And so she's not feeling good. You can see she's deactivating quite a bit of that T4 to reverse T3. The ratio is not very good. This is a patient where I'm saying, I think you're over-medicated. We need to reduce the dose. And she winds up getting that dose eliminated. She stops taking it altogether. And this is 3 weeks later. She's feeling so much better. The anxiousness, the anxiety, those things are gone. The hypothyroid signs and symptoms are improving. And so we take a look at her thyroid panel. This is no medication for 3 weeks. TSH is 7.94. Now that might cause somebody to say, we need to put her right back on medication, right? TSH is too high. But if we look at her total T4, it's still 9.4. There's plenty of T4 in the system. Her total T3 is the best it's been at 112. That means she's doing a good job converting T4 to T3. Her free T4 is 1.4 and her free T3 is 2.9. Her reverse T3 is 10 and the free T3 to free T4 is 0.25. It's still lower than it should be, but this is a person who's actually doing a better job converting T4 to T3 without the excessive thyroid medication. So what do we do in this situation? If she went back to her general care practitioner, she would probably be put back on T4 medication. So does she need it? No, her body makes plenty of T4. She's making plenty of T3. Now, it's still early on. We're still gonna have to monitor this in another 30 days or so, recheck it. But we need to consider that the TSH may just, without the medication, the TSH is up-regulated a little bit to help support thyroid hormone production at the gland, more T4, more T3. There are still some things that are driving this cell stress response, so there's reduced peripheral conversion of T4 to T3, and TSH may be elevated not because there's broken physiology at the gland, but because the thyroid gland is being driven to help support that extra T4 to T3 conversion that's not being done in the periphery, all right? And this happens a lot. And the problem is, this is a case where somebody would be diagnosed with hypothyroidism or subclinical hypothyroidism, and because they have some signs and symptoms, they'd be put on medication, but it's the wrong thing to do, okay? Now, somebody might say, well, what else could be causing that elevated TSH? Maybe this is a person who has some iodine insufficiency. At this point, it doesn't appear that way, but we'll take a look again in 30 days. If T4 levels are really dropping and T3 levels are coming up, and reverse T3 is still towards the lower end, then we'll take a look at it and see if that's the case. But if the person is truly iodine deficient, then the solution isn't to give them more T4 or more T3. The solution is to get them iodine, or make sure they're eating an iodine-rich diet and there isn't things inhibiting that iodine from getting to the tissue. But I know, because I know the patient's history, that we've got some other health and metabolic issues that we need to deal with, and as we continue to improve, reduce the stressors to the system and support gut functions, liver and detox and hormone cycling and sleep and respiration, she's going to continue to get better and better. Conversion will get better and better. That TSH will settle back down again because the peripheral cells will be doing their job in converting T4 to T3 better because there's less of a cell stress response. So what are the key things here? I want you to takeaways. We have to look at a full panel. If somebody just did a TSH test, this person would be on higher and higher doses of medication, right? They'd be playing that medical merry-go-round. So we have to run a full thyroid panel, and I never run a thyroid panel on its own. I also ran her lipids, which each of these, I didn't put it on here, but her lipids look better without the medication than they did on medication, okay? And the labs have to be interpreted, not just read, right? We can't just read a lab and say it's out of the lab reference range. It's above the range, below the range. It's not in somebody's predefined optimal range. This is definitely outside of most people's optimal range. It's above the lab reference range. But does it mean this person needs medication? No. If you interpret the rest of the panel, we can see that the person has sufficient T4, they're converting T4 to T3, there's something else going on, and here's a situation where thyroid medication was applied probably maybe for good intentions, but it's not the appropriate strategy for this person to get healthy and restore their overall health and well-being. If you have questions, put them below the video. Hope these things help.